for joining me. Appreciate you coming on here. So, my first question for you is, do you have any secret passions or skills that might kind of surprise us?
Um, I'm a fairly good cook. I cook for my family when I'm back home, and now that I'm in an apartment with some of my best friends, I do get to cook for them, which is absolutely exciting. I definitely love doing that. And I guess also because I went to art school in junior high, so I've still got some of
Okay.
those hidden talents like um dance. I'm still very much into art and very much into music, so that's still very much a part of my life.
Okay. Now, do you have like a perfect meal you can fix that's great that you like to go to, or like a go-to meal?
Ooh, my go-to when I'm with my family is I make a slow cooked roast beef. Um, in a slow cooker, I do mashed potatoes, any sort of fresh veg, and then my like specialty is I do Brussels sprouts with maple syrup and bacon fat. It's really showing the Canadian in those meals for sure.
Ah, sounds really good though. So you mentioned art. Now, do you have like a favorite piece of art, and do you go to like galleries and stuff like that to look at art too,
Yeah,
or?
so my grandpa and I travel a fair amount, so we've been to galleries throughout the US, in Mexico, and a little bit in Europe. Um, our favorite place to always go is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, especially around the time, like around this season, where they have some of the fashion exhibits. My grandpa and I have both really been into that for many years, so it's always exciting to get to see new pieces and all that.
Okay. What's your favorite piece have you seen?
Ooh, that's a good question. Ooh. I would say any of the pointillism pieces are really super interesting to me. So, the one that was done in France, where it's the Sunday in the park, those are just absolutely stunning to see in person because you can see the layers of paint and the detail where it begins as nothing but a dot and then it transforms into something so captivating. That's definitely one of my favorite pieces for sure.
Okay. And was that in the metropolitan, or did you actually get to see that overseas somewhere?
I believe I saw that in the Metropolitan, or it was at least a version of that, which was very cool. Because the one interesting thing, especially about museums in the US, is how the pieces transfer so quickly. Like they'll be in one museum for a little bit and then they'll move them, and so other people can see them. So I always think those are really neat for sure.
All right. Well, that's nice to know. Yeah, I've been to a few museums, but I need to go more because it is kind of nice to walk around and see like how good and like how much work the artists have put into, especially whether it's paintings or metalwork, how they can, it's like diverse, you know?
Oh, it's wild. Like it's so any of those things, like the amount of time that something that looks small and simple takes is really something that I'm quite passionate about. Like it's something that I find really um beautiful and like kind of outstanding in a lot of respects. Like it's really quite interesting.
Do you paint as well?
I do. So I do a lot of mixed media stuff when I'm at home. My uncle is very much into spray painting and that sort of deal, and I've done a lot of work with wood burnings and copper carvings and multimedia pieces where we're melting plastic and putting them on things and sort of transforming something that looks really dull into something that's completely transformed. That's something that I've done a lot of, and it's something I truly enjoy to do in my free time for sure.
Okay. So how hard is wood burning? Because that seems like a very specific and particular skill you have to have.
It definitely there's a lot of trial and error at first, especially because with wood burning, if you go too deep into the wood, then it becomes this like true dark color. But the lighter you are, the more dimension you can create. So it's really like you try it first couple of times, they're like, oh, this looks like absolutely nothing. And then as you kind of realize like how hard you're pushing into the wood, how fast you're moving, anything, it really then starts to transform. It's really just trial and error in a lot of these facets.
I gotcha. So now I know you've been in athletics for a while and you're currently, playing wheelchair basketball, but you also were a gymnast at a point before you got into adaptive sports. So was there, and you did wheelchair track that I read. So was there a time during your gymnastics and wheelchair track, like a memory that kind of brings a smile to your face, like whether it's a personal victory, kind of a heartwarming moment, or a funny mishap?
Well, there were lots of victories. Like I was a Western Canadian champion in when I was younger and all of those, but the memories that always bring joy to me when it comes to my gymnastics career would have been when I was about 13 to about 16. I was I started it going through the coaching process. So I was working with children that were brand new into dance and rhythmic gymnastics, and getting to see those kids reach a new high or do something that they hadn't done before, like whether it was a cartwheel, a somersault, and just seeing their faces, that was something that was like, it gave me the love for gymnastics that I had my entire life. Like it just reignited that at any time I saw that. And I think now what's really, really interesting for me is that a lot of those girls that I coached when they were 3, 4, 5 years old are still competing now, and they're excelling and they're doing a phenomenal job. And just knowing that I was a part of that stepping stone is something that is fantastic for me. Like that is something that I can go, I I worked with her. She had something. Like there was something there, and they get to show that, and I think that's really probably one of my favorite memories from gymnastics, easily. And for wheelchair track, that's definitely an interesting one. I would say that my first provincial championships, which were in Calgary, so my family was around, my mom, my grandpa, my stepdad, all of those people came out to watch me. It was pouring rain. I remember doing the first 100 and then the 200 and just being absolutely soaked. But the fact that they showed up and they showed out and they were so excited to just see me race was amazing. And so that's always one of the memories where I'm like, I remember walking back to the parking lot, my stepdad's carrying my track chair over his head and is just so excited because I have all my medals. And I was like, you know what? Like this, it was a moment where after having to quit gymnastics and throwing myself into wheelchair track, it was like, hey, like I can still be athletic. I can still do what I want to do, even with these modifications that have to be made. Like that is super cool. And that's something I was incredibly grateful for at that time because high school was hard. That's the best way to put it. High school was hard. So having those moments where I'm like, I can do something that, like, is gonna be shocking to people is like, that was an fantastic feeling, and I'm still incredibly grateful for those opportunities I was given.
Okay, so would you say that kind of set the stage as you kind of entered wheelchair basketball and continued into wheelchair track as well?
Yeah, so I started wheelchair track first. So in high school, all my friends were joining the track team, and I walked in to see my teacher, and I was like, "Hey, I wanna be on the track team. I wanna spend time with my friends, but I don't I struggle with walking. I use crutches all the time. I use a day chair every so often. Like at this point where I'm like, I want to be a part of this, but I can't run. So what can I do?" And they were like, "You know what? Let's get you in a track chair. You'll give her a go. We're gonna get you throwing in a throwing chair." And that really set the stage to be like, okay, like I can do this. Like this is cool. So I was able to set a record for my level in Alberta for shot put, and that was something where I was like, I I felt it was one of those things where I felt fantastic about it, and I was just grateful that they saw that I had limitations, but they weren't afraid to throw me into it and just let me enjoy my like senior season, as they called it. Like it was just my last hurrah.
Okay, so that was your senior season that you started that?
Yes, my senior year in high school, which was it was at the point in that time, I was still, like, incredibly uncomfortable with my disability and being sick and missing classes and not being in the circle that all my friends were in, like, where they're in class every day, they're having lunch every day, when I'm at appointments or I'm unable to go to school or I feel I'm not feeling very well, and it gave me that moment where I'm like, I get to be one of them. Like I don't have to be something different. So that was definitely like that was sort of what sparked my like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Danny. I'm going to ask, what do you think about wheelchair basketball? And that's what I did.
Okay, I got you. And so, Danny, I read about him. And so it
Yes.
sounds like you write, I guess it's his number on your shoes every time you go in before you go to a game. So,
Yes.
what kind of role did Danny play in getting you involved in, I guess, wheelchair basketball or what you do now?
So it's super cool because I will say, like in Canada, the para community, especially for para athletics, is so interconnected that you don't really recognize certain things. So I remember being like probably 12 and Danny coming to watch me do gymnastics. And because he was a friend of my mom was his lawyer at one point, so they became quite close. And after I got sick, I went back to gymnastics for a year, and that was a very rough year. And I decided, you know what, I'm ending gymnastics on my own terms. Like I'm not going to listen to what anybody else says. I'm doing it on my terms, and that's what I did. But after that point, I realized, I have to look out for myself, and I have to do something that's going to be conducive to the long run of my life. So, Danny Brinton, after I started wheelchair track, my mom reached out to him and it was like, hey, what do you think about her doing wheelchair basketball? And I remember him talking about, he was like, you know what? Let me call someone and I'll see. And I remember getting a call back being like, okay, so I've signed you up for a wheelchair basketball class. You're going in on this day at this time. This is where. And I just said, okay, and I like to say that I got strapped in a chair and I never really left. Like that moment, that impact is what led me to where I am now easily.
So, what signifies writing his number on your shoes? What does that make you feel during the games, and just kind of like your ritual, I guess, or
Yeah, so
paying
we
homage to him?
absolutely. So we lost Danny about a year ago. And at that point I hadn't declared to the University of Illinois, but it was my first choice and I was kind of keeping it very hidden. But because of the community that Danny was around, I saw so many of my coaches and my teammates and my friends. And I asked them, I was like, you know what can I do to make me remember Danny in every moment of my wheelchair basketball career? Because that is something that I am super proud of, that I was able to be a part of his community. So they said, you know what? Let's write his number on your shoe. Let's write it on your brace. Let's put it somewhere on your chair so that you have that. And so since I moved to Illinois, I've had his Team Alberta jersey hanging on my wall because that's when I wake up in the morning and it's got my medals on it, and I just go like, I am the athlete I am and the person I am because of Danny. And so it's very symbolic for me. And he was such a big influence in my life saying, like, yeah, you can do this. No one can tell you you can't. So absolutely. It's always just symbolic for me.
I gotcha. And you still keep in contact with your team, correct? And kind of played with them as well, I believe.
Yeah, so I do. So I've got my team in Calgary. We actually just got back from Canadian National Championships at the end of April. And so we were crowned Canadian champions. It was very exciting. So the whole Calgary Rollers team did a phenomenal job. And I was just grateful that they were able to get me back in. And it's going back to that team is like never missing a beat. Like they're guys I've known for 4 years now. They know my family, they know how I am, they know all of the things. So it's like never missing a beat with them. It's like I can go back there and it's like I have never left.
So it's like a extended family, you would say.
Exactly. Like they're guys I call if I'm gonna be in a sticky situation and no one else is around. I'm like, hey, can you help me out? And they're like, no problem. Sure. Easy done.
That's awesome. So if you don't mind, I want to go back. You were talking about when you were first diagnosed with everything and going to doctors and stuff like that. What was that like for you having to one step back from gymnastics, but then realizing something's wrong and you're kind of missing out with time with your friends? What was that like?
So in on June 18th of 2017, I woke up and it was Father's Day and I was like, this is just like any other day. And the minute I got out of bed, I went, something is wrong with my leg. I don't know what. And I was like, maybe I just twisted my ankle. I had had knee surgery a couple of months before, and I was like, maybe it's something like that. I don't know. So I walked downstairs and I told my mom, I'm like, my leg feels weird. And she went to touch it, and she was probably hovering above my leg about this much. And I remember just like it was just a blood curdling scream because it was just incredibly painful. And we were like, this is bizarre. Like, we don't know what is going on. So I spent the next 3 days driving between different hospitals, driving 600 kilometers throughout Alberta to find someone that could figure out what was wrong with my leg. And eventually, on the 21st of June, I was diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome type 2, which basically it's a form of chronic pain that resulted from part of my perineal nerve being sliced during my knee surgery that was done in April of that year. Um, and that was the moment where they told me in the ER, look, some people get better, but most don't. Like, it is going to be a long road, and you're probably not going to walk again without support. You're probably not going to be able to do gymnastics. You're probably going to have to make all of these changes. And I remember being so incredibly stubborn. I'm like, no, I can do this. It's totally fine. And you know what? I did a lot of things that were unexpected, but as time went on, more of the diagnoses came through. So, my main diagnoses are complex regional pain syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I've got a hypermobility disorder where basically all my joints are like overly flexible. And the biggest one of all is I've got something called mitochondrial myopathy with severe methyl 3 glutationic acid depletion, which is a whole bunch of words, but basically my mitochondria don't work properly. So they don't react to energy sources like food and oxygen and all of that properly. So if they're not, I like to say they're just kind of like slow bugs. Like, they just sort of have slowed down and they're like, hey, I'm just going to take a break. But so that's really, it was it's been about 7 years now. I was diagnosed in 2017 with CRPS, and since then i've I've had countless diagnoses, but it's always been like, I'll tell people about them, but I prefer people to see me for the person I am rather than my chair or my braces or the tubes and whatever. Like, it was interesting being a teenager when it started and going into young adulthood with these conditions that no one really understands. Nobody really knows what's going on. And you just have to kind of accept that this is the new reality, but you are still in charge of your reality.
That's a lot. Man, you got some ringers on there, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Like to keep things complicated, as I say.
That's all right. So, what's really interesting is you said you have developed a practice of gratitude before your games. So, did you think that kind of contribute to it, or started around that time period when you're kind of transitioning from teenage to young adult, having all this diagnosis? And then, secondly, do you think having that diagnosis and being able to know what you're actually up against kind of helped as well?
I would say being diagnosed was it explained why things happen. Like, I've had symptoms of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome since I was 2 or 3, from the way I walked to injuries. Like, I was incredibly accident prone. My proprioception is not the greatest. I run into things constantly. And so it sort of put the pieces together, and it put the pieces together not only for me, but members of my family, because it is a genetic condition. We noticed traits that my mom had and my grandpa had and those sort of things. So it was sort of
Oh, wow.
it was an explanation to why things were the way they are. And that was something that was definitely eye opening. And it not only helped me, but it helped everybody around me. And it also helped people, like, when I was able to start going back to school, I was able to explain to people, like, hey, I can't do this anymore, but I can still do a bunch of other things. Like, I may not be able to run around with you, but I can still be there. And then I would say practicing gratitude has been really important to me since I got sick, because the one issue with CRPS is that it affects not only your physical body, but it affects your like your mentality of everything because you're in constant pain. You can't do what you did. Your entire life has changed and like randomly. Like it's not like a spinal cord injury where there's an accident and it happens. It just sort of appears out of nowhere. And so practicing gratitude has always been something that's really important to me, especially after getting sick. So specifically before games, I take a moment to think of things that I am grateful for. So whether it's my support team, things that I can do well, things my team does well, things that the people around me do. I really narrow down into three separate sections. I go, what am I grateful for in myself? Like as the athlete and the human I am, what am I grateful for there? What am I grateful for with the moment that is happening right now? Like, am I grateful for being in this space? Am I grateful for having the opportunity? Like any of those. And then my third section is who am I grateful for? Is it my teammates? Is it my coaches? Is it my family, my inner circle? Any of those things are really or it's the moment that I take to myself and I'm like, I deserve to be here. Because oftentimes, especially in any athletic sort of environment, you can kind of have these moments of, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't deserve to be here. I am weak. I am whatever. But these taking these moments of gratitude, you're like, yeah, I can do this. Like I am in a place where I am talented. I deserve to be here. I've worked my butt off. Like I can do all of these things. And I think that is something that the gratitude has really helped me with for sure.
Did it take a lot of time to kind of get to that headspace through everything that you've been through, or
Absolutely. It's taken oh boy, it's taken I think there are still moments where I'm like, I don't think I'm a good athlete. I don't think I can do this. I'm not strong enough to do this. My body's changed. I can't be expected to do these things. And lots of the times, my coach here in the US, Stephanie Wheeler, has really been the outlet that will remind me that she'll pull me off court and she goes, you can do this. You got this. If I believe in you, you need to believe in yourself now. And that's something that I hadn't experienced from a coach in my entire life up until meeting Steph and being in Illinois. And that was really, that's been a huge game changer. So I would say it's probably been taking 7 years to get to this point where I'm like, I I deserve to be here. I've worked my butt off. Like I am in a place where I am happy and that means I can help the others around me.
that's awesome. So how do you give back to the community in that way to kind of, because you said, you helped in gymnastics. So how are you giving back now?
When I'm back home in Canada, I do a lot of work with David Legg and Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta. So I help a lot with his classes. So I teach them how to play wheelchair basketball. I teach them how the sport itself works and how parasports as a whole work. I also work a lot with children, especially through programs at the Children's Hospital in Canada. And for we have a rec program where kids can sign up and we'll just teach them how to play and they get to experience like they can play basketball and even if it's in a wheelchair like they still can and they can ball out and have a grand old time. And then even here in the US, through the University of Illinois, our disability resource and education services run a lot of events for the community around us. So we do a big Christmas thing where I interact with a bunch of parents. And I mean, I have more phone numbers from parents of kids that have a disability that will text me and say, "Hey, when are you guys playing in Illinois? We want to come out and see you." And I'm like, "You know what? Like, you guys come out and see me. I'm going to help you out in whatever you need." So even if it's just someone that understands what they're going to, especially kids with genetic conditions that didn't show up until they were 2, 3, 4 years old that had these moments where they're like, I don't know what to do now. It's like, hey, I was in your shoes. Look where I am now. And it's all of those giving back moments are my absolute favorite. Like, I love being able to give back to those that got me to where I am today.
That's really awesome. So, would you say there's a lot of benefits for kids that like need to get into adaptive sports no matter what is going on with them? Like, you would highly encourage that just because it seems like, and I noticed, I mean, traditional athletics, yeah, you have a community, but it just seems like with the adaptive community, it's so much tighter knit and very different, and everybody's so accepting, which is amazing.
I would say that any kids that have a disability, or even if you don't have a disability and you want to give a wheelchair sport a try, like I have many players back in Canada that are able-bodied, but they love the sport because they love the community that we create. And having being or becoming disabled at any age is hard, but as a kid, getting sick or being born with your disability and then having to grow up and know I'm different, but there are so many things that I can still do. And I encourage everybody to give wheelchair athletics a try, any form of para athletics, like even if it's just watching it. Like the Paralympics are so not advertised enough, in my opinion. Like I don't feel like half the people know what sports are in the summer Paralympics. Like, but any of those opportunities, even if it's just to watch it, is something that is so you meet people and you can then go, okay, I can rely on a person like this. Like I can tell them what's up, and that's good. Like I have incredibly close friends in the community, but anyone in the community, I'm still going to be like, hey, how are you doing? I'm still going to have these conversations with them because I know where how they think and how they present themselves. And I think any children with disabilities should give, even if it's just swimming with someone else that's got a disability. Like that's phenomenal. Anything that'll allow you to find someone that you're like me, even though we have our differences, we can still relate to each other to a point where I can feel comfortable around you.
So can you kind of go deeper and describe what that's like? Because you said, hey, you're like me. We can hang out. You understand me. Can you explain how important that is having something like that, or somebody, or especially whether it's one person or a community, just be like, hey, I understand. I got you. We're on the same level. I mean, what's that like in your opinion?
I will say there's one person that I have to thank for bringing me into wheelchair basketball and giving me that community. And he's on the Canadian men's wheelchair basketball team, and it's Chad Jasmine. So he's from Calgary. My the first day I ever got in a chair, I strapped in and he immediately came up to me and starts bumping my chair. And I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, hey, have you ever played basketball? You're tall. And I'm like, no, not really. Like I played in junior high, but that doesn't count because wasn't very good at it. And he's like, oh, okay. You want to go? And I'm like, what do you mean? He just starts bumping me and making me move and knocks me over and helps me back up. And I'm like, oh, like I don't know what your disability is, but you're willing to sort of mess with me and get me into a space where I'm, instead of being, oh my God, I'm around so many new people, I'm terrified. It gives me oh, these people aren't scary. Because I will say, like before I got sick, lots of times, especially like around my friends, like they would make jokes about people with disabilities, and like you don't want to laugh, but you're kind of like, oh, this is like I want to relate to my able-bodied friends, and I'm just haha whatever, like even though I'm connected to this community. But at that point when I realized that Chad would make fun of himself constantly about his spinal cord injury, and I was like, "Oh, I can joke about this around you." Like I'm allowed to take the hardships that I deal with and flip 'em around and be like, "This is pretty funny." Like it was that moment where I could be like, "I you're not you're not going to treat me different because of my disability. Like you are not going to go easy on me because I have a disability. You're going to treat me the same way as anybody out on that court." Like and that was the moment where I was like, I'm not treated as fragile anymore. I am tough. I can rumble with the best of them, and it just gives you an opportunity to be who you were before you were disabled with a little extra spunk is the way that I like to describe it. Like I I am so much more my personality has gone from so introverted and not wanting to talk to people after my diagnosis to now like I see people, I'll talk to them in the grocery store, I'll be nice, I'll introduce myself. Like it's become that thing, and that's something I really love about the way that the community, the way that we are.
So do you feel like having met him and then gone through that and seen how he treated you, do you feel like realizing, oh, I can make jokes, I can do this? Does it give you like this, like a power transfer basically? You feel like now you have this power. It's like, oh, I was kind of like looking at it this way, but now it's like, wait, this could not a gift, but I just feel I have control now. It doesn't control me.
Absolutely. And like one of the things I said, especially after getting into the University of Illinois to play wheelchair basketball, was this wasn't what I expected, like becoming sick, becoming disabled, all of that. But I am incredibly grateful for the opportunities I've been given since getting sick. Like, I, if I was still an able bodied dancer, I would have probably gone to university in Canada. I probably wouldn't have been involved in athletics for very long. I would have gone to school and got into the job market by the age I am now. But instead, I've been given the opportunity to come to the US to play ball at the collegiate level, to experience the way that US universities are and the way that they interact and like the rivalries and all that. And like I am so incredibly grateful. Like I've traveled to the Netherlands with Team Canada, to Japan, to places in the US. Like I have been given the opportunity to just be myself, but also become the better version of myself that nobody had expected. My mom used to joke that she would have never expected me to be an athlete because I was clumsy, but turns out that some things change pretty easily, and I'm grateful for this change.
So, how do you think that has kind of changed your approach to life?
I would say that it has made me more open minded. Like, especially after getting sick, I was so like, I don't want to try anything new. I know what works. I'm going to stick to the way it is. But especially since meeting people who are disabled and seeing that like they travel, they get to do all the things that I could imagine as an able-bodied person, but do it with a disability. It's like I am so much more open-minded than I was. Like I am somebody says, "Hey, do you want to try this?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Like let's do it. Let's play a new game. Let's go somewhere different. Like all of those experiences become so much more prevalent for me. Like it's something that I'm like I can look forward to this, cuz especially at the beginning of my diagnosis I was like absolutely not. We're not thinking big picture here. We're thinking like 3 hours from now and that's about it. But now I'm like I can think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Like I can think of this time and be like things are going to change, but I'm still able to be who I want to be and do what I want to do. And so I think the open-mindedness is something that has become so important to me.
That's awesome. So, I've been to Japan before, so I have to ask, what's your personal opinion on the country? Because I think it's one of the most beautiful countries I've been to. It's so amazing. The people are just absolutely so nice, and it's just great.
I absolutely love Japan. I've gone twice now, both after my diagnosis, which I think was very special because I was diagnosed in June of 2017. And at the end of July in 2017, I had gone on an exchange trip. So I was in the Tokyo area and some of the surrounding areas. And when I went back with Wheelchair Basketball Canada last in 2023, I was in Osaka, and I absolutely love the people there. Like I am still in contact with I have this I have there's this 4 he's about 4 now. His name is Soda. He's in Japan. He's got spina bifida, and I'm still in close contact with his parents, and I send them videos all the time saying how much I miss you guys and I'll be back soon. And it's one of those connections where it's like this kid is going to be watching me as he grows up, and I'm still going to have this relationship as a mentor. And I think just the fact that the community of Japan is so open-minded to internationals and seeing what they have to say is so beautiful. And I absolutely, that is easily one of the top like 2 countries I've ever been to, easily.
Oh, that's awesome. What was the I got another question, but first I gotta ask, what was the weirdest thing you ate over there? Because they have some really good cuisine, but different like treats, especially like their candies and sweets are so different than ours. It's amazing.
We had there was one time I had corn ice cream, which was very bizarre, but quite like surprisingly good. It was very interesting. Also, my exchange father when I went in 2017 was a fisherman, so he brought back live squid. And so we got to skin it and take out the ink sac and cut it up. We ate it fresh, and that was definitely, it was a weird experience, but I was like, this is super cool. Like, when am I ever going to do this again? So I'm very, that was probably a strange experience, but it was completely worth it.
I gotcha. So, kind of rolling into mentioned mentors and leadership, and it sounds like you've done a lot of leadership work and are very active in your community. So, there was a time, I guess, when you went to junior nationals was your first time being in a leadership position. So, how was that? How did that affect the game? And did you have any strategies going in?
I we had lots of, we were an older squad, so basically after, you have to be under 23 to go. So we had most people that were around 20 and up, so we had lots of older people, but then we also had a girl that was 14, and we have some 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds and all that. And so I really took a moment to be someone that the younger kids could rely on. Like, if they were concerned about something, they would come up to me and we would just sit there and have a chat. And that was something that some of them still remember to this day. Like, when I was at nationals, I have a girl come up to me and they're like, "Do you remember when you sat in the hallway with me and you just held my hand and you were just like, let's take some deep breaths and relax?" And so those moments were definitely something I would never take for granted. I am so grateful that I was their shoulder to cry on when it was a rough game or they didn't feel like they played their best or whatever. Like, it was that moment where they could be like, I have someone on my team, not only on the basketball court, but also off the basketball court. And oddly enough, I got a bunch of them into doing mindfulness with me before games. So we would all sit in the hallway. I would play my mindfulness work on out loud, and we would just sit there and take our deep breaths and get back onto the court and be like, we got this, like, we're good. And those leadership moments were so important to me. Like, I got to be on the court, and while I get to like be more of a in a point guard position where I'm telling people where they should go or what I need, I was also able to listen and see what other people's strengths were and really play to their strengths. Like, I think throughout junior nationals, I probably had more assists than I had points 90% of the time. Because I'm like, I know what your strength is. You might not think it's a strength, but I see it as a strength and we're going to run with it regardless. And like, that's what we did. And that was something that leadership moment was something that I was like, I can do this again. Like, it's not just in gymnastics. It's not just when I was able bodied. Like, I can be a leader as a disabled person with no issues, with no hesitations. Like, I can be that person.
So, what's the hardest thing about being in a leadership position?
The hardest thing about being in a leadership position is when, especially if you make a decision and then immediately someone who's on your team is like, that was a terrible idea. Why did we do this? Now we're behind a little bit more. And I'm like, then we change it up. Like, you have to keep such a level head, especially with these like younger players because they're not as experienced. They haven't been around long enough, but you have to be like, okay, let's tone it down a little bit and let's like work through it again. And if it doesn't work the first time, like, we won't do it again. If it works, we can do it, we can switch it up. It's one of those moments where you just kind of have to go with the flow and be okay with where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in a leadership position currently in your team in Illinois?
Right now, not particularly. I'm still sort of new to the program. Like I was a rookie this year, so it was very much like I'm in charge of rookie duties and that sort of thing. But I will say I did take a leadership role through the rookies. Like if they had concerns with injuries or not playing or feeling like they're not playing well or not getting along with the older girls, I was sort of the intersection between going between rookies to veterans and communicating between them and then being like, okay, this is something the team should discuss instead of just me being the messenger. So I would say in that respect, I have taken a leadership role here, and I'm looking forward to taking more leadership roles as my years go on through being at Illinois.
Okay, so you're probably the mediator, I would say, between the veterans and the rookies.
Absolutely. That's about right.
Yeah. So why did you choose to go to University of Illinois out of all places?
I got offers from other schools, like, there are about 6 schools in our division for women wheelchair basketball, and I got offers from 5 out of the 6, and there was something about Illinois that was my first call with Steph, I immediately was like, I could play for you for the next 5 years easily. I This is a coach that I foresee treating me with respect, but also pushing me outside of my comfort zone and like putting me in a place where I'm uncomfortable, but I'm like, I can still do this. And the other benefit is that Illinois is closer than a lot of schools to my home in Canada. So I'm able to fly back for Christmas and all of that instead of being in certain states where it's more difficult to do that. So the other thing is I've got a ton of alumni, influences in Canada. So, like, Nick Gonchin went to the University of Illinois, Pat Anderson, a bunch of these guys, Katie Dandino on the women's side, and those were some of the people I asked, and I'm like, "What do you think I should do? Like, I have these options. Where do you think I should go?" And every single one of them said, "Stick with Steph. She is going to elevate the player that you are." And that's what I did, and my teammates, when I came back home from Canada, saw that. They saw how much I've changed and developed, and all of that, like, so much of that credit has to go to Steph because she is a phenomenal coach. Like, she treats me as a human being, but she also is willing to push me to do better than what I am.
Okay, so she's not afraid to push them.
Oh, absolutely not. Because the one thing I love about Steph is that she doesn't see a player for what they are right now. She sees them as what they can be in the future. And that is something that is so beautiful about the way that Steph thinks, is that it's not short term, it's all long term. She's like, I can develop this player into a phenomenal athlete and continue working through that. And that's something that was one thing where when I heard about that, I was like, this is the coach that I need. This is somebody that I need in my circle to have my back, to push my limits. Like, yeah, she is a phenomenal coach.
That's awesome. Sounds like you guys got a good team. It sounds like anywhere you go, you got a good team. You got a good team in Illinois. You got a good one back home that you can go to. It's really awesome.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly lucky in that regard. I have some amazing teammates. I have some amazing athletes by my side. And most important, I have some amazing friends that are able to back me up on and off the court.
Oh, that's the best part. You always need friends. Well, so
Exactly.
given your extended athletic career, what has been the most rewarding aspect? And also, what's been your most formidable challenge that you've had to overcome? And how did you navigate through both of those?
I would say the biggest challenge I ever experienced in athletics was in, oh boy, 2015, 2016 season of rhythm gymnastics. I ended up with a knee injury where my MCL was severely sprained along with my meniscus. And it was the first time that I had experienced an injury that was disrupting my season. Usually I had injuries that lasted throughout the summer and then I came back and I was fine. But this was one where it was middle of the season, it was November, and I was out from December to like the middle of January. And regardless of how injured I was, like, I was always in the gym. Like, I was always sitting there watching my teammates doing hand control things, doing something that could keep my mind at ease and being like, "I can come back to this and do it." But I would say the hardest part about that is learning to trust your body again, because you then go from being in this full length brace where you're walking, but it's controlled, to learning how to jump again, learning how to turn, learning how to move with your knee. Because you have to trust the joints to do what they're supposed to, and you can't be concerned like, oh, this is going to hurt my knee, this is going to do something. Like, you can't have that thought process in any of this. Like, you have to learn to trust your body again. And the same with wheelchair basketball. Like, any injuries there, you have to learn to trust your body again, which is, it sounds easy, but it's a very taxing thing, because you're like, I don't trust this, but I got to do it. And I would say that would probably be my hardest challenge. And but it's one that I overcame by just kind of being like, you know what, like, it can do it, it's fine. And even on days where I would like tweak it a little bit, I was like, you know what, it's fine, we'll ice it, we'll start again. Like, that's fine. So it was definitely a learning curve for sure, because that was my first like major injury, and I was like, oh boy, this is a wild one. So, but yeah.
Yeah, athletes always have a hard time returning to sports. A lot of the psychological stuff, but even though it could be, because I know ACLs, it's like 6 months out, you can maybe start running again before you really get back
Yeah.
in the return to sport. So yeah, it's that psychological factor.
Oh,
But
completely. Like, learning to retrust everything that you've done for years is so bizarre. And it's such an it messes with your mind in a lot of ways. Like, I was like, I can't do these big leaps or these big turn combos that I did. And my coach would just look at me and she's like, you can. Like, your legs are strong enough. You've worked your butt off in physio. Your knee is as strong as it can be. And I had gone through and I went through the season, and that was a very successful season. Like, it was, I placed quite highly. I had worked to this point where I was comfortable and I trusted myself, and I was like, this is fantastic. Like, I feel good about this. And yeah, it was a very mentally taxing season, but it was one of those seasons where I look back and I was like, that smile on my face while I'm on carpet and I'm doing my performance is that's genuine happiness. It's not fear, which is something that like I look back on and I'm like, that was a good season.
so that's interesting. You said genuine happiness. So is that how you feel during every game? What are some moments that really give you that genuine happiness that maybe both in the sport and in life?
There are moments, like, especially in any athlete will tell you, like, throughout a game or throughout a competition season, like, you're gonna have these huge ups and downs. And I think for myself, like, I'm incredibly self-critical, like, and I've known this forever. It's just like the way that my brain thinks is that I can do this better. I whatever, like any of those moments, it just those moments where I can find genuine happiness are often when I'm connecting with my teammates on court, or the bench is going wild while you're on court, or I get messages from my family that I see at halftime and they're like, you are doing a great job. And those are the moments where I'm like, I feel so happy on this court. And the fact that other people can see that around me is something that I'm so incredibly grateful for. And it's really humbling experience where it's like, I'm not the only one that's happy. It's my entire team, my entire support network. It's not just that I'm happy, it's that they're happy. And like any of that communal stuff, just like I will have the biggest smile on my face. Like, there are some photos from me at the free throw line where I'm just sitting there and I am laughing because my teammates are just like, "You're good. Like, you're fine. You're doing a good job." And I'm like, "That's fantastic." And the fact that I can reciprocate that and be like, "You're really balling out today." Like, that's awesome. That is fantastic and I love it.
That's really great. What's one of your best memories from one of your games where you had one of those smiles on your faces?
I would say if I'm looking at the Illinois season, which was my most recent one, I would say we were in Chicago for an invitational tournament, and I was placed in the starting lineup, and we were in the last 2 minutes of the game, and we're playing with men's rules. So once we're in bonus, you shoot one free throw. If you make it, you get to shoot a second one. If you don't make the first one, then you don't get a second one. It's called 1-and-1. So I made the first three free throw. I remember looking at my bench, and my bench is going wild. My teammates are like, "You're good." And we also had our men's team sitting on the baseline, and they're like, they're cheering, and it's not that like they're just looking at me, they're looking at our team as a whole. And there are photos from that where I am just like smiling so big and I'm making faces because me and my teammates are having fun. And that's something I was so incredibly grateful for, was that my teammates were able to give me the energy that I needed back. Like if I was giving them my positive energy, they were giving me positive energy back. They weren't getting mad about the little things that messed up, whether it's me or one of my teammates. It was like this is a fun game. This game feels good. And when we get those games where they feel good, even if you don't necessarily win, that was more rewarding in a lot of instances.
That's some amazing experiences.
Absolutely. It was fantastic.
I gotcha. So, given everything that's going on, limitations and stuff like that you've had and all the diagnosis, how do you stay true to yourself regardless of the circumstances you find yourself in?
My mom has a saying that she said when she was sick around the same time as I was. And it's how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that is something that has really sort of resonated with me forever. Like I say it constantly. I tell people that all the time because you have to be willing to complete these hard challenges, but you can't take on 600 things at one time. You have to focus on one thing and then just start nibbling. Like it's one of those feelings where you know what you believe in and you know how you want to be perceived, and a lot of times the way that you want to be perceived isn't the way you're perceived. And so by nibbling away and showing people your true identity, and whether it's the compassion you have for others or the support you feel you want to give to others, is so crucial to me. And I mean, I've definitely come into my own as a athlete with a disability. Like I have been willing to put myself in positions that are going to make me uncomfortable just because you know what I can. And if I have to stay true to the compassion and the meaning that I feel that I need to give others. So lots of times my teammates get little notes from me because even if I've had a bad day and I'm not necessarily the nicest, they always know that like I have their back. Like if I'm going to yell at you on court, it's not because I'm mad at you, it's because I'm frustrated with the situation. And then off court, I will give you the biggest hugs and tell you that like, "Hey, you're good. That was my bad. I apologize." So they have these moments where even if I snap at a result or I'm not feeling good and I get a little snarky, then they know that like they're like, "No, like she's having a rough day, but that doesn't mean she dislikes us." And that's something that I find like very important, especially with someone with like a disability that's very like changes so quickly. Like um when I haven't run tube feeds in a little bit, or my pain is bad, or whatever the situation may be, and I get a little snappy, they still know that, like, they're like, okay, she's a little grumpy right now. However, she's like, still loves us and she still cares for us, and yada yada. Like, there's still that common understanding that, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm frustrated with what's going on in my own body, and I'm at a point where I can't communicate that effectively. So I would say that's probably like it's pretty tricky, but it's one of those things that I'm like incredibly grateful that the people around me are willing to accept and understand.
I gotcha. So then going into those moments where, you might have had a bad day, the pain's kind of going on. What is your approach and preparation for if it's going into a practice or a game and having, more pain than normal?
Yeah, so There are lots of like little things I do to make sure my body is in a position where I am okay, because lots of tournaments you're there for 3 days and you're playing like 6 games. So it's a
Oh
lot.
wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially with mitochondrial disease, is my energy depletes so quickly. Like I can be good for a little bit and then by like 20 minutes later I can be like, I lovingly refer to it as spacey space cadet, where I'm just staring off and I'm a little confused and a little jumbled. And lots of those times, even if we're in the gym, I know I have to take those moments for myself. So my teammates have more photos of me sleeping on random grounds in gyms waiting for our next game so I can relax my body. I run TENS machines on my bad leg to make sure the muscle spasms aren't bad while I'm playing. And it's just sort of taking care of myself and knowing my body. Like I know that in comparison to a lot of other athletes, I can't eat much during game time. So whether it's the beginning of game time, I can eat early in the morning, I can play a couple of games, I can have a small snack, but I can't have a large lunch. So I have to be I'm very strategic in the way that I set myself up for game days, especially for days where I know like I don't feel very good, but I have to do this. And it's just a way that I have to adapt to the different situations that happen in a lot of ways. So it's very much like I know what my body needs. And so I communicate that with my coaches and our nutritionist and all that. And so they know, they're like, hey, you don't look so great. Let's get you some more hydration or something like that. So it's very much an internal thought process, but it becomes external in a lot of ways because now my team knows what I need in certain situations. Same with my friends. Like if they see me getting a little cranky, they're like, "Hey, you got to have something to eat or something or drink something. Like we got to figure this out." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds like a plan."
Give you a Snickers maybe.
Oh, exactly. It's very very much like all the commercials.
That's all right. So it sounds like you're very intuitive with like when it comes to fueling your body and stuff for the games, and you have kind of a ritual. So it's kind of odd that you said you can't eat. I can understand not eating big meals before the game, but do you have like little snacks? Like runners will do like energy gels. Do you have things like that you can throw in real quick during a game or before a game?
Absolutely. So during a game, one of the big things that my team in Illinois does is we have a fair amount of snacks that are athletic therapist buys us, but also snacks that only the athletes bring. So we bring like gushers, for example. So you can pop a couple in your mouth
Yes,
and pass the package along, and you're like, I'm good for now. Like, that's fine. Or you guys call them Smarties, but in Canada, we call them Rockets. And they're in all of my bags because I'm like, this is something I can pop in my mouth really quick and it'll give me a little bit of a boost, and that's good enough. So I'm very much a big evening eater. Like I will eat big
mm,
dinners, and that's about like then I'm like, okay, like I feel good about that. That feels good to me.
I got you. So I'm an avid rock climber, and so I've interviewed you too. And our thing is going to the crag is snacks like that. So gummy bears or gummy worms are good because you get that like instant sugar boost. So I get it.
Exactly.
So what's your favorite cheat meal? Because I know you said you like to cook earlier. So what's like the greatest dessert and cheat meal that you've ever had?
Oh, that's a really good question. I will say I don't believe they're a thing in the US. I'm not 100% sure, but we have this restaurant in Canada called The Keg, and
I like it already.
they make it so it's a steakhouse, but they make this Billy Miner pie, which is basically like a cookie base, and it's got um, coffee ice cream and vanilla ice cream and nuts and caramel and all that. And that is easily. I'm like, if I'm going out, I'm like, we're going here because I only want dessert. Like that's it. After any big tournaments, I'm like, we're going here. This sounds good. Or if we're on the East Coast in Canada, I'm a big lobster roll girl, so we do a whole lot of that, and any of the sort of like something that I'm like, I could cook this, but that seems like a lot of work, so I'm just gonna go pick it up from somewhere.
I gotcha. So, do you going back to kind of your cooking? Do you like to cook stuff that's really simple and easy, or every now and then do you cook like a nice? like I would say lavish meal, but maybe it takes a little bit longer to prep and cook and all that.
Oh, absolutely. Like sometimes, like especially when we're at school and we've got busy days, like we're cooking something that's incredibly basic because we're like, this is gonna take a lot of time and I'm not into that. And we're like, that's fine. But then when I get home and I'm at the house and my mom's like, okay, we got people coming over. I'm like, okay, we're going full out. We're going like multiple side dishes, multiple mains, like lots of these like very big dinners that take like 6 hours to prepare. And I'm exhausted by the end of it, but I'm just like, I love to be able to see the people around me be excited to eat their food and like excited to experience what I've created for them.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of Thanksgivings throughout the year when you're home, huh?
Absolutely. It's every time I'm home, there's something big going on regardless. I always tell my mom, we're booking at least 2 days where I'm going all out with the cooking.
That's good. So I kind of want to circle back and talk a little bit. We were talking about the Paralympics, and like a lot of people don't really aren't aware of it and don't realize what's going on. Because I know climbing is also trying to make its headway back into the Paralympics, as it just made it in the Olympics. But what are some misconceptions about adaptive sports and individuals that you maybe have encountered from one, a general population's aspect and people that maybe don't know about it? And then what are specific misconceptions about wheelchair sports community that you'd like to share or talk about that people might not know about?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I would say that a lot of times people just assume that everybody that's at the Paralympics is paralyzed. Like they can't walk, they can't get out of their chair, like they're in these sort of positions when that's really not accurate at all. Like there are many people with genetic conditions like spina bifida who still walk with support. They have braces or a crutch or something. Like they're still able to walk. Like I'm ambulatory, so while I use my day chair a good amount of the time, like I'm still able to walk from like my bed to my bathroom or into the kitchen or that sort of thing. So I think a lot of times people just assume that like everybody is completely paralyzed and they can't walk and they can't move their legs or that sort of thing when there are so many like amputees, upper body amputees in throwing and in track and people with cerebral palsy who are able to stand and do all these sorts of things. So I would say one of the big misconceptions is that everybody is paralyzed. And specifically in wheelchair athletics, people just assume that like everybody cannot move their legs and they're high spinal cord injury so they can only lean a certain amount of the way. But you get guys like Nick Gonchin, who's a above knee amputee who is stronger than a lot of able-bodied people I've met, who could probably like he could probably outrun most people. Like he these people are able to live fulfilling lives regardless of their disability, and the ability levels vary so much, especially with like wheelchair basketball, for example. We have a classification that runs from 4.5 to 1.0. So a 1.0 being like a very high spinal cord injury or a very noticeable form of spina bifida. And then you get into like the twos where people have spina bifida or cerebral palsy, but they're able to walk and stand a little bit and they have more core. And then you get someone like me who's a 3.5 who has control of her legs but can't move them perfectly and doesn't have as much core function. And you get a 4.5 who's an amputee who is completely fine from where their amputee is up and they're basically able bodied, but they just don't have a foot or an ankle or a leg or whatever. So I think that's a very big misconception is people think that we all have the same form of disability when in reality there are so many different types of disabilities that are classifiable under the IWBF, which is the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation, and under the International Paralympic Association. Like there's all of these there's so much variation. When people often think para, they're like, oh, paraplegic, when no, you get bocce ball guys that have very high levels of quadriplegicness. And like it's I think that's really the big misconception is that everybody's the same and everybody has the same disability when like no. You get blind people, you have people who are hard of hearing, like it's so different. And I think that's just one thing that people don't necessarily notice is they're like, "Oh, well, good enough," when it's like, no. Like and we're all each individuals and like one thing that I've noticed, especially being in para athletics, is you get people who come up to you and they kind of speak to you like you're incredibly young and you're not as like many of us, like, we're kind of spoken down to, but then you start talking and you're expressing your emotions and you're showing all these things and people are like, "Oh, you're really just like me." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just you, but in a wheelchair." Like, that's the only difference. Nothing changes. And I understand, like, many people aren't, pushed to have experiences with people with disabilities, and oftentimes they can be hesitant, when in reality, like, there should be no fear, like, we're not very scary, we're not gonna do anything, it's not contagious, like, you're gonna be just fine, we're people just like you.
I hear you. Yeah, there are people do have a lot of misconceptions out there.
Oh, absolutely.
So what you're saying is basically, look me in the eye. I'm right here. I'm right here.
Exactly.
I gotcha. So with all of those categories, and you have people that has maybe a higher disability versus kind of a lower end disability, kind of the best way I can describe it.
Yes.
You guys all play together, right? Whether and it's mostly it would be girls against girls, though, and boys against boys, correct?
Yes, so in wheelchair
Okay.
basketball, like, we do play co-ed in sort of the, like, smaller systems, so, like, um, in in the NWBA, which is the National Wheelchair Basketball Association here in America, they play up until, like, adults, they play mix, like, co-ed, so you can play with men and women. Same in Canada, like, my Calgary team is co-ed, like, I play with men and women. Same with Team Alberta. But in the collegiate system and in the international system, we play women on women, men on men. Like, so it's separated into the 2 genders.
Okay, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Mhm.
Thank you for educating me. I'm here to
Absolutely.
learn, so that's awesome. So, kind of want to talk about you were talking earlier, which is really cool, and you're talking about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, right? And the individual coming up to you. So, what was it like when you started to push yourself out of your comfort zone? What kind of tools did you use to get through that? Was it kind of a self propulsion, like you did it on yourself? You really kind of got the ball rolling. And what advice would you give for people that are maybe kind of hesitant to get out of their comfort zone?
The one thing that I've been told is, like, your comfort zone is comfortable because you're not pushing yourself to the next level. And I came to this point where I'm like, I want to make myself uncomfortable, which sounds bizarre to other people, but the best way for me to push myself was I'm like, I'm going to do one thing a day that makes me uncomfortable, whether it's me going to the mailbox and having a conversation with a neighbor that I don't really talk to, I don't really want to talk to, but I'm like, this is going to make me uncomfortable. I'm just going to do it. Why not? And I remember when I first got sick, I wrote a list in my phone of ways that I can make myself uncomfortable, whether it was just talking to my friends about my disability or talking to my doctors about things that were going on in my life that weren't medical, like pushing myself like these tiny, tiny, tiny baby steps, which to most people wouldn't seem like anything, but it was something that was a huge deal to me. And I would say that my advice to anybody is just to take these tiny, tiny nibbles of what makes you uncomfortable, like whether it's talking to someone new or introducing yourself or trying a new sport, going out to a new place, like any of those things that might not seem like a big deal to others, but are a big deal to you is breaking out of that comfort zone and making yourself uncomfortable. And that's ideal for me is I want to be in a position where I'm still comfortable and I'm happy and I'm content with my choices, but I want to do something that's going to push me outside of my comfort zone and get me out of the box and try something new.
That the same advice you give to the kids you work with?
A lot of the times, yeah, and a lot of the times I go in with especially when you get kids that are really nervous, I'm like, "What about basketball or what do you think about being in a wheelchair that you think is fun?" Whether it's throwing a ball at a wall or moving your chair fast or pushing really fast, and, like, lots of times they're like, "I wanna race," and I'm like, "You know what? Let's do it," and they're like, "I don't wanna race you," and I'm like, "Here, why don't we do this? Like, I'll give them a little head start, and then I'll race them, and if I beat them, I'm like, we're gonna do it again," until they finally get to a point where they're like, "This made me uncomfortable, but now I'm having far too much fun." And I'm like, "This is great. awesome. And like some of the little kids don't really like to talk about being different. And I'll ask them, I'm like, what makes you different from me? And they're like, well, we have different color hair. I'm like, okay, what else? And they're like, well, but we look different. And I'm like, okay, do you still think I'm nice? Well, yeah, you're very nice to me. Okay. So you're not afraid of me? And they're like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, there you go. You were afraid of me. You were nervous to meet me, but now you're in this position where you're like, I can talk to you and I can tell you this is what I did at school today. And that's my favorite thing about working with some of these kids where they're like, you won't believe what I did today. And I'm like, okay, tell me about it. And I'll just sit there and then I'll be like, okay, you want to race me? And they're like, okay, good. It sounds like a deal. And it's one of those things where it's these little interactions just mean the absolute world to me. Like I'm so incredibly grateful for so many of the kids I've met. Like my little buddy in Japan, Sota, has learned some English to talk to me and say like, "Hi, I miss you. I love you. I can't wait to see you." And I'm like, that pushed him out of his comfort zone. He learned something new. And so then I push myself out of my comfort zone to learn something about their culture that I can send them a message back or like try to do something that shows them that I also care about them and I'm willing to learn for them.
It's awesome. What's it
Mhm.
like watching a kid just kind of blossom from like this inner shell to now they're just like an extrovert per se?
It is probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Like, it is something that just anytime you see a kid that then who walked into the gym for the first time and is looking at his feet and doesn't wanna look you in the eye and is nervous, to the next time they walk in the gym and they have this big smile on their face and they push over to you and they're like, "What are we doing today?" And I'm like, it is quite possibly the most rewarding feeling ever. And it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. And without becoming disabled and being introduced to wheelchair basketball, I don't think I would have the same rewarding experience coaching gymnastics as I do with wheelchair basketball.
That's awesome. So looking forward, do you want to do a lot more work with like kids in the adaptive sports and everything? And what do you kind of want for the future of, adaptive sports in general?
I think adaptive sports, the one thing that I want more than anything is for not only people with disabilities to be exposed to it, but also people with who are able-bodied to be exposed to it. Like a phenomenal thing that happened this year was there were opportunities for some of the girls who play for Team USA for wheelchair basketball and also some of the collegiate girls to go to the women's March Madness finals, like so Iowa against South Carolina, and they got to play on the court during halftime so that all of these people that are watching able-bodied basketball are then exposed to wheelchair basketball and seeing like holy crow, like these guys can shoot, they can play, they're rough on chairs, they're in there and they're engaged, and it's just like that was truly like an exciting experience to, even though I wasn't involved in it, like just being able to watch that and be like, I know those people. They're super cool. I'm so glad that other people are seeing this. Like that is the future I want for adaptive sports, for us to be a part of the NCAA, for us to be more noticed, and for people of like our countries to be excited that like, hey, you guys are going to the Paralympics and that is equally as good as the Olympics, because people often think like the Paralympics are like a reward for disabled people, when in reality like it's still cutthroat competition. Like you are fighting every single game to be the best athlete and the best team in the world, and it's one of those things where that's the future I hope for adaptive sports, is just for there to be an overall understanding that like this is a killer sport. This is so cool. I want to watch this more. I want to be involved. Like, and it's something that is like I'm very passionate about, and I work very hard to like make sure people are like engaged in this and like see different things.
So really cool thing, and this kind of goes back to because you're a gymnast. So I kind of want to ask this question because we talked about your gymnastics and art, and a guy I talked to, Ben Mayforth, he's a paraclimber and everything. And he was talking about with climbing, he has this like in climbing, he's able to him express himself in a way that he just feels like he has complete utter freedom. And so, do you get that same sensation when you play basketball?
Absolutely. I often say the first time I got into a basketball chair was the first time that I, since becoming disabled, where I felt like I was when I was on in gymnastics and performing, and it gave me this, like, I am free. I can be whatever I need to be in this moment. I can be like, I am quite possibly the least confrontational person when I'm off the court, but on court, like, I will trash talk. I will be absolutely rough on chairs, but I get to express myself in a way where I'm like, I'm still incredibly nice to you, but I'm still going to joke around with you. I'm going to push you around. I'm going to be just sort of, I get to be who I am off court, but also I get to be who I want to be on court. And I get to show people that, like, hey, I can play well, but I can also just be like an absolute goof on the sidelines. Like, there's really no, the barriers then become so much less. And it's like I am relaxed when I'm on court, which was never a thing when I was a gymnast. I never felt comfortable. I was always trying to be better than the person beside me. When in wheelchair basketball, I don't feel that necessarily. I just feel like I get to be the best version of myself that I can be.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. All right, Miss Anika, I'm out of questions. So I really
Oh,
appreciate your time and talking to me tonight. It's great to meet you. It's been a
absolutely.
pleasure.
I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can make it go longer and longer and we get to do another interview maybe down the road. I would love to do that.
That
So,
sounds like a deal to me.